The scratching at the cabin door came in the deepest part of night, just as the stars began to fade behind the eastern ridge, a slow, rhythmic scrape, not frantic, but persistent, as if the creature beyond had waited until the exact moment when silence felt safest. Evelyn Hudson stirred beneath the weight of wool blankets, her breath fogging in the chill air of the small room. At 76, sleep came lighter than it once had, and this sound carried purpose. It was not the random pawing of a bear testing for weakness or the blunt shove of an elk against the logs. This was deliberate. This was known. She rose slowly, joints protesting the cold floorboards, wrapped the quilt around her shoulders like armor, and crossed to the door. The latch lifted with a soft click. Wind rushed in first, sharp with pine and snow, carrying the metallic tang of blood. Then she saw him. A massive gray wolf lay collapsed on the threshold, chest rising and falling in shallow, labored heaves. His coat, thick and storm-dusted, was matted dark along one flank where fresh wounds wept. He weighed well over 140 pounds, broad shoulders, long legs built for endurance, and yet he made no effort to rise. Behind him, three small shapes huddled close to the cabin wall, their eyes reflecting the faint lantern glow from inside, wide, frightened, too young to understand why the world had shrunk to this frozen doorway. Evelyn's heart seized. She knew that wolf. A thin, crescent-shaped scar of white fur curved across his right shoulder, a mark left by barbed wire he had ripped through as a yearling, tearing flesh to reach safety. She had cleaned and stitched that wound herself 14 years earlier, in this very cabin, when he was a shivering, orphaned pup, no bigger than a house cat. She had named him Tundra, after the swift river that carved the valley below her land. Through blizzards, through miles of unforgiving wilderness, through every hardship that should have claimed him, Tundra had returned. And he had not come alone. Evelyn dropped to her knees in the snow, heedless of the cold seeping through her wool pants. Her hands, roughened by decades of outdoor work, reached for him. Tundra, she whispered, the name cracking in her throat. His pale gold eyes, dimmed now by pain and exhaustion, found hers. Recognition passed between them like a current, steady and ancient. He turned his head with visible effort, glancing first at the pups trembling behind him, then back to her. The look needed no translation. They are all I have left. Keep them safe. She had rescued him once before. Found him as a 3-week-old orphan beside the body of his mother, killed by poachers for sport. She had bottle-fed him goat's milk warmed on the wood stove, rocked him through nights when he whimpered for a pack that no longer existed, taught him to chase shadows in the fenced yard until his legs grew strong. When the time came, she had released him, opened the gate at dusk, and watched through binoculars as he trotted into the trees, tail high, never looking back. Letting go had carved something permanent from her chest. But love, she had learned, sometimes demanded exactly that. Now he lay dying, having poured every remaining ounce of life into one final journey. The pups, barely 7 weeks old, legs still unsteady, fur fluffed against the wind, were his last legacy. Evelyn moved first to the young ones. The largest male, dark-shouldered and bold, stepped forward warily, nose twitching. The female, silver along her spine like moonlight on water, followed more cautiously. The smallest, pale and quiet, hung back, amber eyes locked on his father. Evelyn extended her palms slowly, letting them catch her scent. Wood smoke, wool, the faint trace of pine sap that clung to her always. Tundra rumbled low in his chest, not a growl, but a permission, a passing of trust. One by one, the pups came closer. The dark male touched his cold nose to her glove. The silver female licked the tip of her finger tentatively. The small one pressed his forehead briefly against her wrist before retreating. They were wild-born, raised to fear the smell of humans, yet they accepted her because the wolf who had carried them here had chosen her. Getting Tundra inside tested every limit Evelyn had left. She fetched the thickest wool blanket from the bed, slid it beneath his massive frame, and dragged him across the threshold inch by painful inch. Her back burned, her arms trembled, breath came in short gasps. The pups slipped in behind, pressing low to the floor, eyes never leaving their father. When the door finally closed, sealing out the wind, the cabin felt impossibly small. 4 wolves and one old woman sharing the same firelit space. The air thickened with the scent of wet fur, blood, and something deeper, a bond that had survived 14 years apart. She built a nest near the hearth, every spare blanket, old coats, even the quilt from her own bed. The pups huddled together in the warmth, still shaking. Tundra watched her steadily, never blinking. She knelt beside him and examined the wounds. Deep lacerations across ribs and hindquarters, some from teeth, some perhaps from wire again. Internal damage was certain. He had traveled too far, pushed too hard. She knew the limits of miracles. "I'll try," she whispered, stroking the fur between his ears the way she once had when he was small. He lifted his forelegs slowly, painfully, and laid his massive paw across her wrist. The weight was gentle, deliberate, warm. 14 years earlier, when nightmares woke him crying in the night, she had placed her hand on his narrow ribs, applying steady pressure until his breathing slowed. Now he returned the gesture. "Thank you. I trust you. It is enough." The pups watched in silence. Then, as if given a signal, they approached one by one. The dark male nosed her palm again. The silver female licked her knuckles more confidently. The small one leaned his whole body against her arm for a heartbeat before retreating. Tears burned Evelyn's eyes. These were creatures born to run from her kind. Yet here they were, offering trust because their father had. In the quiet hours that followed, she gave them names. The bold male became Kovu after the old word for thunder, for the way his small body already carried promise of power. The silver female she called Ayla, for the high, clear song of the mountain streams she loved. The quiet one became Echo, because he seemed to hold silence the way a valley holds snow, deep, patient, encompassing. 3 days blurred into one long vigil. Evelyn spoon-fed Tundra warm broth made from venison scraps, cleaned his wounds with boiled cloths, kept the fire roaring through endless nights. She spoke to him constantly soft stories of the river, of winters past, of the first time he had chased a grasshopper in her yard. The pups stayed close, watching with eyes too wise for their age. They understood absence in the way animals do, through scent fading, breath slowing, warmth leaving. On the third evening, Tundra rallied. He lifted his head higher than he had in days and began a series of soft, deliberate vocalizations, short whines, low rumbles, gentle chuffs. The pups snapped to attention, ears forward, bodies still. He was teaching them, not commands, but understanding. How to read this human scent as safety, how to accept food without fear, how trust could cross the divide between worlds. Evelyn sat motionless, tears streaming unchecked. A wolf who had every reason to fear humans was spending his final strength ensuring his children would not inherit that fear. When the effort exhausted him, he lowered his head. The pups moved closer. Kovu pressed his side against his father's shoulder. Ayla curled beside his ribs. Echo tucked himself beneath Tundra's chin, small body trembling. Evelyn rested her hand on the great wolf's head, feeling the slow rise and fall. Tundra's eyes met hers one last time, calm, certain, filled with something like peace. He slipped away as the storm outside eased, as stars pierced the clearing sky, as the fire settled into glowing coals. He died surrounded by his children and the woman who had once been his entire world, knowing they were safe. Evelyn remained beside him through the night. The pups lay against their father's cooling body, confused, grieving in soft whimpers. At first light, pale and merciless, she prepared to lay him to rest. She wrapped him in the blanket that had carried him inside, then dragged him when her strength faltered up the narrow ridge behind the cabin. There, beside the simple stone marker where she had scattered her brother's ashes years earlier, he had been her only living kin. She chose a spot overlooking the valley. She built a cairn of river stones, each one chosen for weight and permanence, stacking them high enough to withstand wind, snow, and time. The pups watched from below, huddled together on the path. They did not understand death, but they felt the absence like a wound. When she returned, Kovu approached first. He sniffed her hands, her coat, searching for the familiar scent that was no longer there. Finding nothing, he looked up with eyes full of questions. Evelyn knelt and gathered all three close. They pressed against her, small bodies trembling, seeking the warmth and reassurance only closeness could give. "He loved you more than anything," she whispered. "He brought you here because he believed I would keep you safe. And I will. I promise you that." The months that followed reshaped Evelyn's world entirely. Raising wolf pups was nothing like raising dogs. Their instincts surfaced quickly, fiercely. Kovu asserted dominance early, shouldering his siblings aside at feeding time, standing taller when strangers, even birds, approached the clearing. Ayla observed before acting, her movements precise, her mind already cataloging patterns in the world around her. Echo remained Evelyn's quiet shadow, always near, always watching, adjusting his behavior to the slightest shift in her mood or the wind. She gave them structure and freedom in equal measure. Mornings began with walks into the forest, short at first, then longer as their legs strengthened. She taught them to read tracks in fresh snow. The delicate prints of snowshoe hares, the wider slots of deer, the dragging marks of porcupines. She showed them how wind carried scent, how to use it rather than fight it. She used the vocalizations Tundra had demonstrated: sharp barks to mean stop, soft rumbles to mean come closer, low whines to signal caution. Play became their classroom. Kovu initiated mock hunts, stalking pine cones or Evelyn's boots, pouncing with growing accuracy. Ayla excelled at ambushes, hiding behind logs and bursting out at the perfect moment. Echo preferred quieter games, chasing shadows, rolling in snowdrifts, curling beside Evelyn when the others tired. They grew astonishingly fast. By late spring, their baby fluff had given way to sleeker guard hair. Legs lengthened, shoulders broadened. They wrestled with joyful ferocity, the clearing echoing with mock growls and yips. Kovu placed himself between his siblings and anything unfamiliar: a hawk overhead, a distant coyote call, instinctively protective. Ayla solved problems with quiet intelligence, finding new paths around fallen trees, remembering exactly where a cache of bones lay buried days earlier. Echo developed an uncanny sensitivity, alerting Evelyn to approaching storms long before clouds appeared, sensing her fatigue before she felt it herself. Evelyn watched them change from frightened infants into confident young wolves, and with every passing day the knowledge grew heavier. Her task had never been to keep them. It had been to prepare them for a life she could not share. The call of the wild arrived gradually. Distant howls drifted across the valleys at dusk, deep, resonant, layered with meaning Evelyn could only guess at. Territory, family, belonging. The first time Kovu heard them clearly, his entire body froze. Ears pricked, muscles taut. He listened as though the sound unlocked something ancient inside him. Then he lifted his head and answered a clear, powerful howl that rolled out across the ridges. Ayla joined almost instantly, her voice higher, bright with the same longing. Echo added his own, lower, steady, woven through with gentleness. Evelyn stood at the cabin door, heart fracturing. The pack never approached the clearing, too wary of human scent, but their presence tugged at the young wolves like an invisible tide. Restlessness settled in. They paced the tree line at twilight, whining softly at the door during hours they should have slept. They stared into the forest with an intensity that made Evelyn's throat tighten. She had seen what happened when wild creatures were denied their nature. Pacing, hollow eyes, spirits dimmed. She would not do that to them. On a warm July evening, when the sun hung low and golden and the air smelled of sun-warmed pine and wildflowers, Evelyn knew the moment had come. She called them with the familiar sounds Tundra had taught her: family calls, safety calls, trust calls. They appeared at once. Kovu leading, Ayla watchful, Echo pressed close to her side. She led them deeper into the forest than they had ever gone together, through thick stands of lodgepole pine, across rushing streams, over ridges where views opened to snow-capped peaks. Her legs ached, breath came short, but she refused to falter. This was the last thing she could give them. At the edge of a wide alpine meadow, where scent posts and scratched trees marked the boundary of another pack's territory, she stopped. She could feel eyes watching from the shadows, assessing, cautious, curious. Evelyn knelt in the grass, moss soft beneath her knees. Kovu stood tall beside her. Ayla studied her face intently. Echo leaned against her leg, trembling faintly. "You are ready," she said, voice steady despite the storm inside her. "You know how to track, how to hunt together, how to listen to the world. Now you must learn the rest from your own kind. You must become what your father always intended. Wild, free, fully yourselves." She rose slowly, painfully, and turned away. Behind her came confused whines, soft barks of uncertainty. Echo's cry followed her longest high, pleading, breaking. But Evelyn kept walking, step by deliberate step, tears blurring the path, until the meadow vanished behind trees and the sounds faded into silence. That night the cabin felt vast, empty, echoing. She sat by the fire, staring into flames that offered no comfort, grieving the quiet that had replaced their footsteps, their play, their warmth. Then, near midnight, howls rose into the darkness, a chorus of voices, old and young, woven together in harmony. Among them she recognized three, Kovu's deep and commanding, Ayla's clear and resolute, Echo's gentle and unwavering. They had found their place. They belonged. In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary began to take shape, a bridge between worlds that should never have touched. The young wolves did not vanish into the wilderness and erase her from memory. Instead, they returned. Kovu appeared first, at dawn one morning, leaving a fresh-killed snowshoe hare on the porch steps clean, unmauled, an offering of gratitude and remembrance. Ayla came next, sitting silently at the forest edge for hours, silver coat catching sunlight, watching the cabin with quiet vigilance, guarding the woman who had once guarded her. Echo visited most often. Some nights he curled on the porch boards, close enough that Evelyn could hear the steady rhythm of his breathing through the walls, comfort without intrusion, presence without possession. They ran with their new pack, hunted under the guidance of elders, claimed territory, defended borders. They took mate strong, wary partners who learned slowly that this human was different, was family. Then came the pups. One spring morning, Kovu and his mate arrived at the clearing's edge with 4 tumbling youngsters. The little ones stared at Evelyn with wide blue eyes, then bounded forward fearlessly, tails wagging, because their parents showed no fear. Ayla brought her litter later, 3 quiet, observant pups who watched everything before approaching. Echo's young were gentler still, curious and affectionate, staying close to their father as he lay beside Evelyn on the porch, letting the pups climb over her boots and sniff her hands. Years turned slowly, inexorably. Evelyn's hair faded to silver white, her hands knotted with arthritis, her steps careful on uneven ground. But loneliness never returned. The wolves ensured that. Kovu rose to alpha, scarred from battles, respected for his calm strength, leading with the same quiet certainty his father had shown in those final days. Ayla became the pack strategist, reading the land, planning hunts that carried them through brutal winters, earning loyalty through wisdom rather than force. Echo remained the guardian, the silent sentinel who sensed danger before it arrived, who kept the family connected through subtle signals and unwavering presence. They visited through every season. Their children grew, found mates, raised litters of their own. 3 generations now came to the clearing. Adults lying watchful while pups tumbled in the grass, practiced tiny howls, chased butterflies under the trusting eyes of parents who believed in Evelyn completely. It felt like something beyond reality, like a promise kept across time and species. On a crisp October evening, when Evelyn was 82 and every breath carried the weight of years, she knew her time was near. Her heart fluttered unevenly, the world sometimes blurred at the edges. Wrapped in the old quilt that still held faint traces of tundra's scent, she climbed the ridge one final time. The cairn stood, unchanged, strong, enduring. She settled against a familiar boulder, breathing shallow, watching the valley fill with twilight. Movement stirred in the trees. A wolf emerged, then another, then more. They came until the hillside was lined with them. Gray, black, silver coats, catching the last light, silent, solemn, gathered. Kovu stood at the center, massive and battle-worn, pale gold eyes carrying the same wisdom his father once held. Ayla beside him, elegant, silver touched along her muzzle. Echo near, concern softening his gaze as it met hers. Behind them stood their grown children, and behind them the youngest, clumsy, blue-eyed pups, tumbling over paws too large, unaware of the gravity of the moment. They had come for her. Kovu approached first, moving slowly, respectfully. He lowered himself to the ground, then laid one massive paw across her knee. The same gentle, deliberate gesture his father had made 14 years earlier. Ayla followed, pressing her forehead softly into Evelyn's open hand, the touch reverent. Echo lay beside her, warm body steady against her leg, just as he had when he was small and frightened. The pack formed a wide circle around them, watching, witnessing, honoring the woman who had saved their line by saving 3 helpless pups long ago. As the sun slipped behind the peaks, painting the sky in rose, gold, and deepening violet, a soft snow began to fall, large, silent flakes drifting down, catching the fading light like scattered stars. Evelyn closed her eyes. She felt them around her, wild, beautiful, free. She heard the low, rolling chorus rise, voices layered across generations, singing of gratitude, of memory, of lives forever intertwined. In that song she heard Tundra, felt him in the steady pressure of Kovu's paw, in the gentle weight of Echo beside her, in the quiet vigil of the pack. The circle was complete. She had saved him when he was helpless. He had saved her when isolation had begun to claim her, not through possession, but through trust returned. Together, they had woven something enduring, not of blood, but of kindness remembered across years and species. As the snow fell thicker and the world softened into white hush, Evelyn smiled. She had lived a good life. She had loved deeply, in ways few ever know. Surrounded by wolves beneath a sky of fading gold and gentle falling white, she let go. The pack remained through the night, keeping vigil, keeping faith. When dawn arrived, clear and bright, painting the snow-covered peaks in rose and amber, they lifted their voices one final time, a song of endings and beginnings, of love that crosses every boundary. Then, one by one, they turned back to the forest, carrying her memory forward through the generations, through seasons, through the wild heart of the world that had brought them all together. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching.